Once upon a time, in the peaceful kingdom of Luminara, there lived a young princess named Elara. She was known throughout the land for her kind heart and gentle spirit. As the evening stars began to twinkle in the night sky, let me welcome you to this magical bedtime journey where dreams come alive and worries fade away. Princess Elara wasn't like other royal children you might have heard about. She had long chestnut hair that seemed to shimmer with golden flecks when the sunlight touched it, and eyes the color of twilight, a soft blend of blue and purple that changed with her mood. But what made her truly special wasn't her appearance. It was her ability to speak with the flowers in the royal garden. Every evening, as the kingdom prepared for slumber, Elara would venture into her favorite place, the royal moonlight garden. Here, white roses bloomed only under the gentle glow of the moon, and silver-leafed trees whispered secrets when the night breeze passed through them. The princess would sit on her favorite stone bench, close her eyes, and listen as the flowers shared stories of visitors who had passed through during the day. Tonight was different, though, as Elara settled onto her bench and greeted her floral friends. The roses seemed unusually quiet. The princess leaned closer, her soft voice carrying through the garden. "What troubles you, my friends? Why are you so silent tonight?" After a moment of hesitation, the eldest white rose finally spoke, its voice as delicate as morning dew. "Dear princess, the moonlight that nourishes us grows dimmer each night. Soon, we may not have enough light to bloom." Elara looked up at the sky with concern. Indeed, the moon seemed fainter than usual, its silvery glow barely illuminating the garden paths. The princess had never considered that the moon itself might need help. But if her beloved flowers were in danger, she knew she had to do something. As she walked back to the castle, her soft slippers making almost no sound on the marble floors, Elara's mind was filled with questions. How could she, a young princess who had never ventured beyond the kingdom's borders, help something as vast and distant as the moon? That night, as her handmaiden brushed her hair before bed, Elara asked quietly, "Mira, do you know any stories about the moon needing help?" Mira's hands paused momentarily before continuing the gentle strokes. "There is an old legend, Your Highness. They say that far beyond the Whispering Mountains lives the keeper of celestial light. This wise being tends to all the lights in the sky, the stars, the comets, and yes, even the moon." Elara's eyes widened with wonder. "Have you ever met this keeper?" Mira smiled softly. "No, princess, few have. The journey to the keeper's home is long and filled with gentle challenges that test one's patience and kindness." As Elara nestled under her silk covers, her mind drifted to thoughts of this mysterious keeper and the fading moonlight. Perhaps tomorrow she would find a way to help her garden friends. With this comforting thought, the princess slowly closed her eyes, allowing sleep to carry her into dreams filled with moonbeams and whispering flowers. The next morning, Princess Elara woke with the first light of dawn, a plan already forming in her mind. If she wanted to help the moon regain its brightness, she would need to find the keeper of celestial light. But first, she would need guidance. After breakfast, she visited the royal library, where ancient books filled towering shelves. The air smelled of parchment and wisdom. The royal librarian, an elderly woman named Thea, with silver hair and kind eyes, greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Princess. What brings you to the library so early today?" Elara explained about the fading moonlight and her desire to find the keeper of celestial light. Thea's eyes sparkled with interest as she listened. "I believe I can help you," she said, walking slowly toward a section of particularly old books. She carefully removed a thin volume bound in midnight blue leather with silver stars embossed on its cover. This book contains maps and information about the path to the keeper's dwelling. As Elara carefully turned the delicate pages, she discovered that the journey would indeed be challenging. The path led through the Meadow of Whispers, past the Tranquil lakes, and up the Whispering Mountains. According to the book, each location presented a unique challenge that would test the traveler's character. "I must prepare for this journey," Elara said with determination, though her voice remained gentle. Thea looked at her with concern. "Princess, perhaps you should send royal guards or experienced adventurers instead." Elara shook her head gently. "The book says the keeper only reveals themselves to those with pure intentions. I must go myself, for the sake of my garden friends." With the queen and king's reluctant blessing, for they knew their daughter's kind heart could not be swayed once she had decided to help others, Elara prepared for her journey. She packed lightly, a small bag with some food, a water flask, a warm cloak for the mountain nights, and a tiny vial of perfume made from her beloved white roses. As dawn broke on the following day, Elara set out from the castle gates. She wore a simple dress of lavender linen instead of her royal gowns, and comfortable walking shoes replaced her delicate slippers. Only a small silver circlet on her brow hinted at her royal status. The royal advisors had insisted she take one companion for safety, so beside her walked Nina, a young woman from the village, known for her knowledge of plants and healing. Nina carried a backpack with additional supplies and a small book of remedies. As they left the kingdom's borders behind, Elara felt both nervous and excited. This was her first adventure beyond the castle walls, and though the purpose was serious, she couldn't help but feel a thrill as they entered the wider world, where the grass seemed greener and the sky somehow vaster than within the kingdom of Luminara. The first leg of their journey took them through gently rolling meadows dotted with wildflowers of every color. Butterflies danced around them, occasionally landing on Elara's shoulders as if greeting her. The princess smiled, remembering to thank each tiny creature for its brief companionship. By midday, they reached the edge of the Meadow of Whispers. Even from a distance, Elara could hear the soft, murmuring sound that gave the place its name. As they stepped into the tall grasses, the whispers grew louder. Not unpleasant, but impossible to ignore. "What are they saying?" Nina asked, looking around curiously. Elara listened carefully. The whispers seemed to be repeating thoughts and worries from her own mind, concerns about the journey ahead, doubts about her ability to help the moon, fears of disappointing her parents or her garden friends. "I think," she said slowly, "they're voicing our fears and doubts." The book mentioned that the Meadow of Whispers tests one's resolve. As they continued walking, The whispers grew more insistent, more discouraging. Turn back? Too difficult. Impossible task. Beyond your abilities. Nina's steps began to slow, her face troubled as she listened to her own doubts echoed back to her. Elara felt the weight of the whispers too. But then she remembered the worried faces of her flower friends in the moonlight garden. With gentle determination, she took a deep breath and began to hum a lullaby her mother had sung to her as a child. The sweet melody seemed to cut through the discouraging whispers. Elara took Nina's hand and continued humming, adding soft words about courage and friendship. Gradually, Nina joined in, her voice harmonizing with the princesses. To their surprise, the meadow itself began to change. The whispers transformed, now echoing their song back to them with encouraging words, interwoven: courage, friendship, kind hearts, journey onward. By sunset, they had crossed the Meadow of Whispers, its final message, worthy travelers, still echoing gently behind them. They made camp at the edge of a small forest, setting up their tent near a babbling brook. As night fell and the stars appeared one by one, Elara looked up at the moon. It did indeed seem dimmer than it should be, its light barely strong enough to cast shadows. Somewhere, far beyond the whispering mountains, whose peaks she could just make out in the distance, waited the keeper of celestial light. With renewed determination, Elara closed her eyes and fell asleep to the gentle sounds of the forest night. The dawn brought with it a soft mist that clung to the ground and wrapped around the trees like delicate scarves. Elara and Nina packed their camp and continued their journey, following the map toward the tranquil lakes that lay between them and the whispering mountains. As they walked through the forest, Elara noticed that the animals seemed drawn to them. A family of deer watched curiously from between the trees. Rabbits hopped alongside their path, and colorful birds flitted from branch to branch above them, singing sweet melodies. "They sense your gentle nature, princess," Nina remarked with a smile. "Animals always know a kind heart." By midday, the forest began to thin, and soon they could see glimpses of water sparkling between the trees. The tranquil lakes, 7 small bodies of water, connected by narrow streams, lay before them, their surfaces as smooth as polished glass. According to the book, crossing the lakes would require patience and harmony with nature. There were no boats and no bridges, only stepping stones that appeared for those who approached with peaceful hearts. Elara knelt by the shore of the first lake and dipped her fingers into the cool water. "We come as friends," she whispered, seeking passage to help restore the moon's light. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, circular stones began to rise from beneath the water's surface, creating a path across the lake. The stones were spaced just far enough apart to require careful attention. For each step, we need to move slowly and keep our thoughts calm, Elara said, remembering the Aesop book's warning. The stones respond to the tranquility of the traveler's mind. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the first stone. It felt solid beneath her foot, though it seemed to float on the water's surface. One by one, she and Nina made their way across the first lake, their movements deliberate and thoughts focused on peace. As they crossed the second and third lakes, Elara noticed that the stepping stones appeared more quickly, almost anticipating their approach. By the fourth lake, she realized that the stones were appearing in patterns, beautiful spirals and curves, rather than straight lines. The lakes are testing our adaptability, Nina observed, as they followed a particularly winding path across the fifth lake. Each crossing is different from the last. On the sixth lake, the stones appeared and disappeared rhythmically, requiring them to time their steps with the pulse of the lake itself. Elara and Nina found themselves moving almost like dancers, stepping forward when a stone appeared and pausing when it vanished, only to reappear moments later. The seventh and final lake presented the greatest challenge. No stones appeared at all when they approached. Instead, the surface of the water shimmered invitingly. Elara remembered a passage from the book. The final lake asks for trust. With a gentle smile at Nina, she stepped directly onto the water's surface. To her amazement, it held her weight as if it were solid ground, though it still rippled slightly beneath her feet. "The water supports us," she called back to Nina. "We need only trust that it will." Together, they walked across the surface of the seventh lake, marveling at the fish swimming beneath their feet and the perfect reflection of the sky above. When they reached the far shore, they turned back to see all 7 lakes glowing with a soft blue light, as if blessing their journey. Ahead of them rose the Whispering Mountains, their peaks wrapped in clouds. The path grew steeper as they began their ascent, winding between ancient trees and moss-covered boulders. Though the climb was challenging, the air felt invigorating, filled with the scents of pine and wildflowers. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountain slopes, they found a small cave that offered shelter for the night. Inside, to their surprise, they discovered a small hearth with kindling already arranged and 2 comfortable-looking moss beds. "It seems the mountain welcomes weary travelers," Nina said as she lit the fire. That night, as they rested in the cozy cave, with the fire casting warm light on the stone walls, Elara thought she could hear distant voices in the wind, the famous whispers that gave the mountains their name. They weren't discouraging, like those in the meadow, but gentle and musical, almost like a lullaby. "Rest now, kind hearts," the mountains seemed to say. "Tomorrow's path leads to wisdom." Comforted by these whispers, Elara drifted into peaceful sleep, dreaming of starlight and the luminous face of a full moon shining brightly once again. As morning light filtered into their cave shelter, Elara and Nina prepared for what would be the most challenging day of their journey. The path ahead led to the highest reaches of the Whispering Mountains, where the air grew thin and the wind spoke in more insistent voices. After a simple breakfast of bread and dried fruit, they continued their climb. The path narrowed as it wound around the mountain, sometimes barely wide enough for a single person to walk comfortably. On one side rose the rocky face of the mountain. On the other, a steep drop into misty valleys below. "Stay close to the mountain wall," Elara advised, her hand trailing along the cool stone for balance. As they climbed higher, the whispers in the wind grew more distinct, unlike the meadow's whispers of doubt or the comforting night whispers. These seemed to be asking questions. "Why do you seek the keeper?" the wind asked. "To help restore the moon's light," Elara answered honestly, her voice carried away by the same wind that had asked the question. "And why does the moon matter to you?" came the reply. Elara thought of her garden friends, of the white roses that bloomed only in moonlight, but she also thought of sailors navigating by moonlight, of nocturnal animals that relied on the moon's glow, of people everywhere who found comfort in the gentle light that brightened even the darkest night. "The moon brings beauty and guidance to many," she answered. "Its light is gentle, but essential." The questioning wind seemed satisfied with her answer, for it died down temporarily, allowing them easier passage along a particularly narrow section of path. By midday, they reached a plateau where the path split in 3 directions. There were no signs, no indications of which way would lead to the keeper's dwelling. The book had mentioned this junction, but offered no guidance on which path to choose. "What do we do now?" Nina asked, looking at each path with uncertainty. Elara closed her eyes and listened. The mountain whispers surrounded them, but gave no clear direction. Then she remembered something her mother had told her. "When in doubt, follow what brings life." She opened her eyes and looked more carefully at their surroundings. The leftmost path led through barren rocks. The middle path seemed easier, winding through a tunnel in the mountain. But the rightmost path, though steeper, had small alpine flowers growing alongside it, and a butterfly fluttered in that direction. "This way," Elara said, pointing to the right path. "Where there's life, there's hope." The climb grew more challenging, but the presence of flowers, small shrubs, and eventually even tiny trees confirmed they had chosen correctly. By late afternoon, they reached another plateau, larger than the first, where a small crystal-clear pool reflected the sky perfectly. Beside the pool stood a simple cottage built of silver-white stone that seemed to glow with its own inner light. A garden of stars, flowers that looked like tiny lights, surrounded the dwelling, and wind chimes made of what appeared to be moonstone tinkled softly in the mountain breeze. "We've found it," Nina whispered in awe. "The keeper's home." As they approached, the door of the cottage opened. Standing there was neither an old wise man nor a magical creature, as Elara had half expected, but a young woman with silver hair and eyes that shifted colors like the aurora borealis. She wore a simple white dress, adorned with tiny crystals that caught the light. "Welcome, Princess Elara of Luminara and Nina of the Healing Hands," she said, her voice melodic and warm. "I am Celine, keeper of celestial light. I've been expecting you." Elara blinked in surprise. "You knew we were coming?" Celine smiled, stepping aside to invite them in. "The stars whispered of your journey, and the mountains told me of your approach. Few seek the keeper, and fewer still make it through all the challenges. Please, come inside and rest. We have much to discuss about the fading moonlight." The interior of the cottage was both simple and magical. Crystals hung from the ceiling, casting rainbow light across whitewashed walls. Star maps covered a large table, and glass orbs containing what looked like miniature galaxies lined the shelves. A fire burned in the hearth, but instead of ordinary flames, it glowed with blue and silver light. Selene offered them warm tea that tasted of honey and starlight, then sat across from them at the table. "Now," she said gently, "tell me why you've come all this way." Elara explained about her moonlight garden, the distressed white roses, and her concern about the fading moon. As she spoke, Selena's expression grew more serious. "Your concern is warranted," the keeper said when Elara had finished. "The moon's light is indeed fading, but not for the reason you might think." She waved her hand over the table, and a miniature image of the moon appeared, floating above the star maps. "The moon doesn't create its own light. It reflects the sun's light. Lately, a cloud of stardust has been gathering between the sun and moon, blocking some of the light that should be reflected." "Stardust?" Nina asked. "Like cosmic dust?" Selena nodded. "Yes, the remains of a star that completed its life cycle. Usually, such dust disperses naturally, but this cloud has become trapped in an unusual pattern." She looked directly at Elara. "This is where you might help, Princess." "Me? But what can I do about stardust in the sky?" "The dust is responding to something from your kingdom," Selena explained. "A rhythm, a pulse that's keeping it swirling in place instead of dispersing. I believe it's coming from the new clock tower that was recently built in Luminara." Elara gasped softly. Indeed, a magnificent clock tower had been completed just months ago, celebrated as a marvel of engineering. Its pendulum was said to keep the most precise time in all the known lands. "The pendulum's swing," Selena continued, "is creating a resonance that reaches far beyond your kingdom, all the way to the heavens. It's this resonance that's trapping the stardust." "So, we need to stop the clock?" Nina asked. "Not necessarily stop it," Selene said, "but change its rhythm. The pendulum needs to swing in harmony with the natural rhythms of the cosmos, not against them." Elara thought about the master clockmaker who had designed the tower. Master Orion would need to adjust his creation, but would he believe such a tale? Selena rose and walked to a shelf, returning with a small crystal vial filled with what looked like liquid starlight. "Take this to him. When placed near the pendulum, it will reveal the dissonance. Any master craftsman will understand what needs to be done once they see it." As night fell outside the cottage, Selena invited them to stay until morning. "The descent is too dangerous in darkness," she explained. "Besides, tonight I can show you something special." She led them to the garden outside, where the star-like flowers now glowed even brighter in the darkness. In the center of the garden was a circular pool, different from the one they had seen upon arrival. "This is the celestial mirror," Selene said. "On clear nights, it shows not just reflections, but connections." As they gathered around the pool, its surface began to shimmer. Instead of reflecting the night sky above, it showed Elara's moonlight garden back in Luminara. The white roses looked pale and drooping, but they were still alive, still waiting for the return of strong moonlight. "They're holding on," Elara whispered, touched by the sight of her beloved flowers. "Nature is resilient," Selene assured her. "Fix the clock's rhythm, and the moon's light will strengthen again." That night, as Elara lay in a bed of impossibly soft cloud-like material, she felt both relief and renewed purpose. They had found the source of the problem, and had a solution to bring home. Tomorrow, they would begin their journey back to Luminara, carrying not just the crystal vial, but also new wisdom about how connected everything truly was. From a garden of roses to a clock's pendulum to the very light of the moon itself. With these comforting thoughts, Elara drifted into peaceful sleep, dreaming of moonlight restored and flowers blooming under a silver sky. The journey back to Luminara seemed quicker than the journey to find the Keeper, as if the path itself recognized their urgent mission and sought to aid them. The whispering mountains offered gentle breezes that seemed to propel them downward. The tranquil lakes formed their stepping stone paths more readily, and even the Meadow of Whispers greeted them with encouraging murmurs rather than doubts. When the familiar towers of Luminara Castle came into view on the afternoon of the third day, Elara felt a surge of joy and anticipation. The crystal vial from Celine was safely tucked in an inner pocket of her cloak, its contents occasionally shifting and glimmering like captured starlight. Their return caused quite a stir. The royal guards spotted them first, sounding horns to announce the princess's return. By the time they reached the castle gates, the king and queen were waiting, relief evident on their faces. "My dearest daughter," the queen said, embracing Elara tightly. "When your letter said you were seeking the Keeper of Celestial Light, we feared you had undertaken an impossible quest." "Not impossible, mother," Elara replied with a gentle smile. "Just challenging in ways I needed to experience." That evening, after bathing and changing into fresh clothes, Elara joined her parents in the royal study to explain everything she had learned. She told them about the meadow's whispers, the lake's lessons in patience, and the mountain's testing questions. She described Celine's cottage and the explanation about the stardust trapped by the clock tower's resonance. "Master Orion must be consulted immediately," the king said when she had finished, examining the crystal vial with curiosity. "This clock tower was meant to be the pride of our kingdom, not a source of cosmic disturbance." The master clockmaker was summoned the following morning. Orion was an elderly man with bright, intelligent eyes and hands that, despite their age, moved with precision and grace. When Elara explained what Celine had told her about the clock's rhythm, he listened with growing concern. "It never occurred to me that the pendulum's swing could affect something so distant," he admitted. "But then again, we are all connected in ways we rarely comprehend." They proceeded to the clock tower together. Elara, her parents, Master Orion, and Nina, who had become the princess's trusted friend through their shared adventure. The tower rose majestically above the central square, its face displaying not just the time, but the phases of the moon and positions of stars. Inside, the massive pendulum swung in its steady rhythm, tick-tock, tick-tock, marking seconds with unerring precision. Master Orion opened a panel in the mechanism and motioned for Elara to bring forth the crystal vial. As she held it near the pendulum, the liquid inside the vial began to pulse with light, brightening and dimming in a pattern that was clearly different from the pendulum's swing. The dissonance between the two rhythms was visible to everyone present. "Remarkable," Master Orion whispered, stroking his beard. "The vial is showing us the natural cosmic rhythm. See how it flows in gentle waves rather than sharp ticks. Our mechanical precision has been working against nature's flow. He spent the rest of the day making careful adjustments to the pendulum and its mechanism. By sunset, he had created a new counterweight system that allowed the pendulum to swing in a subtly different pattern, one that matched the pulsing light in the crystal vial perfectly. "It's done," he announced finally, watching with satisfaction as pendulum and starlight pulsed in unison. "The clock will still keep perfect time for our needs, but now it does so in harmony with the cosmos." That night, Elara hurried to her moonlight garden, eager to see if their efforts would make a difference. The evening was still young, the sky only beginning to darken into twilight. Nina accompanied her, equally curious about the outcome. They sat on Elara's favorite stone bench and waited as the sun's last rays faded and the first stars appeared. Then, gradually, the moon rose above the castle walls. At first, it seemed no different than it had been before their journey, a dim crescent providing barely enough light to see by. But as it climbed higher, something began to change. The moonlight strengthened noticeably, casting more distinct shadows across the garden paths. The white roses began to stir, their drooping heads slowly lifting toward the strengthening silver light. One by one, their petals unfurled more fully, drinking in the moonbeams that now streamed down in abundance. "It's working," Nina whispered, her face illuminated by the increasingly bright moonlight. By midnight, the transformation was complete. The moon shone with its full former glory, its light strong enough to read by, strong enough to make the entire garden glow with an ethereal silver radiance. The white roses bloomed fully, their petals seeming to shine from within. "Thank you, Princess," came the delicate voice of the eldest white rose. "You have saved us all." Elara's heart filled with joy as she looked around her beloved garden, now restored to its nocturnal beauty. But her journey had given her new eyes to see beyond just her immediate surroundings. She thought of sailors who could navigate safely, again, of nocturnal creatures who could hunt and find their way, of children everywhere who would no longer fear unusually dark nights. In the weeks that followed, reports came from throughout the kingdom and beyond of the moon's restored brilliance. People celebrated the return of strong, silver moonlight, never knowing that it was due to a princess who listened to flowers and a clock that now ticked in harmony with the stars. Elara continued her evening visits to the moonlight garden, but now she also spent time studying astronomy with new curiosity about the connections between heaven and earth. Nina became the royal herbalist, tending to both the castle gardens and the health of the kingdom's people, and sometimes, on particularly clear nights, they would look into the garden's reflection pool and see not just the moon and stars, but brief glimpses of a silver-haired woman smiling down at them from her cottage in the mountains. As for Master Orion's clock tower, it became famous not just for its accuracy, but for its unusual, flowing rhythm, a rhythm that, though few realized it, matched the very pulse of the cosmos itself. Visitors often remarked on how soothing they found the clock's gentle tick, 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 so different from the sharp mechanical sound of other timepieces. And so, as all good tales must, our story comes to its peaceful end. Princess Elara of Luminera grew in wisdom as well as years, eventually becoming a queen known for understanding the delicate balance and connections between all living things. The moonlight garden flourished under her care, and it was said that on special nights, when the moon was particularly bright, visitors to the garden might hear the flowers singing soft lullabies, perfect for drifting into sweet, peaceful dreams. So close your eyes now, dear listener, and let the moonlight outside your window wrap you in its gentle silver embrace. May your dreams be filled with blooming roses, tranquil lakes, and mountains that whisper encouragement. Remember that even the smallest actions can have far-reaching effects, just as a clockmaker's adjustments helped restore light to the entire night sky. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and remember that connections exist between all things under the moon and stars, including you. Good night. Good night.